Perfect.
How is it going, Bears fans? Welcome back to another episode of Beared Down Uncut, the show where we talk everything Bears every day of the week. Today, in honor of the NFL Combine starting up in a mere 48 hours, we are back in episode number 174 of Uncut, breaking down 5 targets that the Bears should keep an eye on at this year's Combine, getting a little bit of draft coverage going here. Really looking forward to the Combine, looking forward to being there with my co-host. It should be a really great weekend. But if you guys are new to the channel and you want Bears content as much as we can possibly pump it out, do us a favor wherever you are listening, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, drop a like, follow, subscribe, and we're going to keep coming back to you guys as much as we can with draft coverage, free agency coverage, all the bread and butter throughout the rest of the offseason. I am your host, Chris Malpe. Today, to break down some Combine prospects, I am joined alongside my co-host, Parth Shaw. Parth, how have you been? Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Been busy, lots of school and stuff. Just got back home, and yeah, just gonna relax a little bit, record this, and then excited to go to the Combine on Thursday. It should be a great time. It's gonna be my first time there. I know Chris was there last year, so it should be a good time to see all the QBs, wide receivers who are going to be in attendance. It's obviously a big day for the Bears as they're going to be looking at wide receivers and corners in the upcoming draft.
And ironically enough, that's all we've got on this list. You would assume we talk about offensive linemen, and I'm sure we will in the future. But as for right now, this entire list we have comprised only has wide receivers and cornerbacks on it. And you and I are both going on Thursday. That's going to be quarterbacks, cornerbacks, and wide receivers. So definitely we'll be keeping an eye on a lot of these guys. I'm sure live tweeting about it all on Thursday afternoon. But there is a lot to look forward to. And we're going to be breaking down 5 prospects we think the Bears should keep an eye on in this upcoming Combine here today. So let's jump right into it. First and foremost, I've got Chris Olave, wide receiver out of Ohio State. Call this one a long shot. That is completely fine and understandable and justifiable. We've probably got 2 long shots on this list as is. But Olave is someone that makes sense for Chicago. Obviously, as you can see, the Ohio State connection. We saw Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow rip it up this year because of the chemistry that they built in college at LSU. Bringing in someone like Olave would not only make sense to address Chicago's needs, but also would be a great piece that Justin Fields is familiar with, and he can continue to build on that in year 2. Olave recently received a comparison to the Washington Commanders' Terry McLaurin, but he's smooth, he's steady, and he really makes things happen. I think he has top shelf speed and create vertical opportunities better than potentially anyone else in this draft class. He also has great burst and separation on most all of his routes. Seems pretty effortless in the air. He's someone who can go up there and get it regardless of where you put it. He also keeps plays alive for sure. He's someone who can improvise as a wide receiver, continue to make plays happen for his quarterback, as we saw him do with Justin Fields at Ohio State. So not much more to say about Olave. He would be a home run pick. I'm not sure that he slips as far as Chicago would like him to, which is why we have him as a little bit of an unrealistic option on this list. But if the Bears do want to trade up and Ryan Poles wants to make an impact with his first pick with the Bears, Chris Olave is definitely someone that is worth targeting. Parth, you got anything to add here about your thoughts on Olave?
I mean, just his connection with Justin Fields, it was special at Ohio State, and seeing that translate to the NFL would obviously be a lot of fun, like we saw Chase and Burrow do this year. I think those two would be a dynamic pair. Like you said, it could be a little bit of a long shot, but he has been slipping down some draft boards lately. And again, time to time, you see players that should have been drafted in the first round that fall to the second round, and the Bears can capitalize on this if Olave is sitting there at 39.
Absolutely. And maybe trading up into the late first round, early in the second round, not giving up a ton of draft capital just to move up a couple picks. That could be in the realm of possibilities for Chicago if he continues to slip down the board, like, say, someone Justin Fields did last year. So I know the Bears are low when it comes to draft capital, but Chris Olave, definitely someone who I think would be worthwhile in moving up for. Parth, I'm going to pass it over to you now. You've got a cornerback next. The very physical Roger McCreary out of Auburn. Tell me a little bit about him and why you think he would fit well with the Bears.
He plays in the SEC, and the SEC has the best wide receivers in all of college football. He's had his ups and downs, but he had a very good Senior Bowl. A lot of the coaches said he was the best corner at the Senior Bowl. His practices and even during the game, he played really well. He's a veteran. He has 135 career tackles in 42 games at Auburn, 6 interceptions, 2 which came from the past year. He also has 38 passes defended through 4 seasons. He had 12 in 2019 and 16 in this past year, which shows that he's only getting better. His coverage skills are getting better. He also was a dynamic offensive high school athlete. Played basketball and football, obviously. He's tied for 4th in coverage according to PFF of all the corners that are entering the draft, and also has the 3rd most passes defended in college and for all the corners that are entering the draft. He's athletic, he's fluid, and he plays really well coverage. And that's the most important thing the Bears have to look at right now. If you look at our corners from this past year, we definitely were very thin. Outside of Jaylen Johnson, there wasn't much production in the cornerback position for the Bears. We saw Kindle Vildor come in at times to play at cornerback too, and that didn't go too well. Duke Shelley had his ups and downs, but the Bears are desperately looking for cornerbacks, and he's someone that who's shown some really good flashes, and he will be there on day 2, I feel like, and the Bears can definitely find themselves a starting cornerback on the day 2 of the draft in Roger McCreary.
Yeah, McCreary isn't essentially someone who had the interception numbers last year versus some of the other cornerbacks that we'll get to here momentarily, but he's someone who definitely has the ball skills and the ability to come and exceed in this league and might be available in a similar situation like Jaylen Johnson was just a couple of years ago. So it should be interesting to see how Chicago approaches this. But once again, there's a lot of ambiguity in that secondary. The only really surefire piece they have is Jaylen Johnson. There are very high hopes for someone like a Thomas Graham Jr. in the slot, but we didn't get to see him play much until the end of last season. Not to mention he was a 6th-round pick. And then I mean, I think I can rightfully say that no one's incredibly confident in Kindle Vildor much more. So whether the Bears go to free agency or the draft, they're going to have to address the cornerback position early on. And McCreary would definitely be an interesting option that they could jump on there. Let's move back to wide receivers. As I mentioned earlier, this video is going to go wide receiver, corner, wide receiver, corner, wide receiver. And I'm going to jump back to someone I really like out of Georgia. That is George Pickens, the 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver from the reigning champion Bulldogs. He recently got an NFL comparison to Josh Reynolds, and I think he could be a really, really reliable wide receiver for Justin Fields moving forward. He obviously battled back from that ACL tear to be able to play late last season. I think he has some great burst that can help him overtake the press. He's always someone who's been great in the red zone and really plays with an appetite for the end zone. And I think he catches with really good hands. He doesn't seem to drop much and also has some very elite catch radius. So, at 6'3", he might be a little smaller than the ideal NFL receiver, but he's able to rise and extend and snag a lot of balls that are thrown out of his way. So George Pickens is a very reliable receiver who I think more realistically than someone like a Chris Olave, and maybe even more realistically than the receiver we're going to talk about last, will be there if the Bears want him in round 2. So it should be interesting to see how the Bears approach it moving forward. But we saw Pickens have some success with the Bulldogs last year, obviously the season ending in a national championship win. So Parth, I'm going to pass it back to you momentarily. What are your thoughts on George Pickens, the wide receiver out of Georgia?
He's very underrated. His time at Georgia, I feel like he wasn't able to produce as well as he could have. But in the NFL, I think he'll be an absolute stud, especially just his route running skills. I think will take him far in the league. He is a starting wide receiver in the National Football League, in my opinion, and it would be a home run for the Bears to land him at 39. I do see him going a little earlier, though, even though whatever the reports have been saying.
Yeah, should be interesting to see where he falls as well, but seems like it's more realistic maybe that he falls a little bit further than Olave. So should be interesting to see how it pans out. But once again, another great wide receiver that the Bears can end up adding there early in the second round, maybe another trade-up option once again. Now comes our unrealistic cornerback option in our mind. Kyler Gordon out of Washington led the #1 passing defense in the league last year in NCAAF, and is a really explosive elite player coming out of Washington that's going to be highly regarded as we continue to approach this draft. So, Parth, I'm going to pass it back over to you. Talk to us a little bit about him and why you think, because you told me you thought this was a little unrealistic, why you think it would be worth it for Chicago to trade up and get him.
The only reason I think it's unrealistic is just because of how well I think he's going to do at the combine. If you look at how he plays, I think he'll put up some really good combine numbers that will move him into the first round. But he's an exceptional tackler. We saw that in his tape, and he's also a dynamic mover. He moves very quickly. He's agile. He's also able to get off the ball, and he can close separation. And he's shown that. He's also effective in zone coverage, which you don't see many times, especially in college corners, to be good at man and zone. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's a little bit on the bigger side, but he has the athletic ability to play a really well corner. And like I said, the Bears have a very, very weak cornerback room. And if you can find him in the second round, I would definitely take him.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of his film earlier today, and he blew me out of the water, not only in the passing game, because I thought he was absolutely exceptional, and had an outstanding agility on the outside and quickness and coverage that helped him stay with opposing wide receivers, but also just his ability to succeed and excel as a tackler. He's someone who I think could be very valuable on special teams. Also, something interesting to note, Washington, the Huskies, lined him up both on the inside and the outside during his time in college. Seems like he preferred playing inside there, and his schematic fit might be somewhere where he's playing on the inside. But overall, Kyler Gordon's someone who is a very reliable player, has been pretty healthy as of recently, and is someone who you can move around the field if you need to. And it seems like the Bears might need some flexibility there. So should be interesting to see how that one pans out as well. I really think the Bears are going to be choosing between a cornerback and a wide receiver with this pick if they can't address the offensive line in free agency. Let's move into our last player we're talking about here before we close out the video. It's going to be Purdue wide receiver David Bell. A huge week for him this week at the Combine. Not only did he go to Purdue in West Lafayette, his hometown is in Indianapolis. He's going to be showing out for a lot of people at home this weekend. So NFL Next Gen Stats has him projected to be an average starter in the NFL with a comparison to Zay Jones, a very good all-around player. And I think he has great value when he's working outside or working in the slot. He's really good with volume target share and has been able to accept a lot of, games with a lot of wear and tear on his body throughout the last couple of years. I think he has very unpredictable releases into a lot of his routes, maximizes yards after the catch, and is very good at eluding tackle attempts in space. David Bell, I think, is just a very well-rounded wide receiver, someone that Chicago could most definitely use. I think he'd excel alongside Darnell Mooney in Chicago if the Bears ended up making this move. But Parth, before we close it out, I want to pass it back to you. This is someone that Bears fans have had their eyes on for quite some time, arguably since the 2021 season ended. So as we continue to approach the Combine now and then the draft, what are your thoughts on David Bell?
I'm a big fan. As a big
Not
Indiana
an actual
Hoosiers
fan, not an actual fan. You're an IU fan, but a fan of Bell, yes.
I'm a fan of Bell. Even though I'm a Hoosiers fan, I thought he played really well for them. I mean, he's been there for 3 years and has played some very consistent football. In his 3 years there, he's had 21 touchdowns, almost 3,000 yards, and you can't go wrong with a workhorse like that. The Bears desperately need a workhorse wide receiver. Outside of Darnell Mooney, there isn't really wide receiver that stands out in this room, and he brings that consistency that Justin Fields needs in a target. Someone who he can depend on. And I think David Bell's a great option for the Chicago Bears, as the Purdue quarterbacks definitely depended on David Bell, I felt like, all year. And it would definitely be a huge improvement to this offensive room, especially the wide receiver group.
Yeah, a very well-rounded wide receiver that you can put anywhere on the field and can be a threat anywhere on the field. So David Bell, honestly, might be the most intriguing of all of those options. Not only that, but also the most realistic for Chicago based on what they're looking for and where their pick lies, assuming you don't want them to trade up. So it should be very interesting to see how the Combine pans out if any of these guys gain or lose stock. And also if anyone else falls into the Bears wheelhouse. Maybe one day we'll have the Beared Down warehouse. But that'll pretty much do it for us. We're really looking forward to getting to the NFL Combine here in just under 48 hours. Should be interesting watching a lot of these players in these important positions that the Bears need to address. But thank you guys so much for tuning into episode 174 of Uncut. We're trying to bring you content as consistently as we can. So if you haven't already, do us a favor, drop a like, subscribe, follow wherever you may be listening. If you want more content from us, the link to our website is in the bio, beardown.com. If you'd like to find the podcast on Instagram and Twitter, you can find it on both platforms at Beared Down. And finally, you can find the links to my social media platforms as well as Parse down in the description. It's another great way to interact with us. We're active year-round on Instagram and Twitter. It's a great space to see our thoughts on all things Bears, the National Football League, and the entirety of Chicago sports. Parth, the NFL Combine is really, really close. Players are starting to roll into here, into Indy as we speak. And it seems like football is kind of coming back here just a little bit. There are a lot of heated debates going on in baseball right now. People looking forward to March Madness, but it feels good to have professional football back to some extent. Any last words before you sign off, though?
Yeah, anytime there's some football news, I'm always excited. Especially this time of the football season. Bears fans, I feel like, are always hopeful and have that just hope for the next year.
Potentially a little over optimistic.
Usually, yeah. But with a new administration here in Chicago, you can always be a little bit more hopeful and excited to be at the Combine. And yeah, there's a lot of players that I'm excited to see. We'll be live tweeting about them, so make sure to follow us on Twitter and check out yesterday's video about the 5 wide receivers that we think the Bears should target in free agency.
Yeah, if you can't tell already based on the path we've taken with our videos since we've been back, I think number one, we're going to have a lot more list videos like these where we just break down some potential targets. And also, wide receiver is a position that the Bears need to address.
Yeah,
whether that's re-signing Allen Robinson, someone that Ryan Poles said today in his press conference at the Combine that he wants to repair the relationship with, whether it ends in Robinson re-signing a contract or leaving, or anything else. There are a lot of other, unsecure factors in terms of like guys like Damiere Byrd and Jakeem Grant. Wide receivers, a position the Bears are going to have to address, and we're going to keep talking about it as the offseason continues. You got to bolster up this offensive line, get Justin Fields more weapons, and we could be in for some big business in 2022. Guys, it's been a pleasure to be your host. Once again, my name is Chris Maltby. NFL Combine in less than 48 hours. We're really looking to be there and bring you guys as much content as possible. But for now, this is it. And as always, Bears fans, do us a favor and stay safe and bear down. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.